morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee and Football, presented by Texas Electricity Ratings. I'm your host, Blake Monroe, where I'm joined this morning by Jerry Hamilton and Coach Bob Shipley, who's filling in for Bobby Burton as he is on vacation this week. But guys, tell us where you're checking in from, what you're drinking this morning. We love to see that. And more importantly, Jerry, we are 2 weeks away from spring football. 2 weeks. Can you believe it?
14 days away, and after last night in Waco, it needs to get here fast.
Well, yeah, the basketball team obviously did not fare too well. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But yes, 2 weeks away from spring football here, 14 days. And, you know, we try to do this countdown with current players on the roster. Well, the two guys wearing 14 transferred out, so we had to go back a couple of years to Brendan Schooler on there for 14. But yes, 14 days away. There's a lot going on as the team gets ready for spring football, and there's a lot going on with the coaching staff when it comes to recruiting, Jay. I know you and CJ both have put a ton of information on TexasFootball.com. What's the latest there?
Yeah, I'll get into that. You got to bring up Nick Coronado's welcome in his post here, his comment.
Give me time.
I gotta say, hey Nick, man, that make us feel bad there this morning. He was checking in from Cancun this morning.
Oh, there we go.
Beach. Yeah, there you go. Margarita flavored coffee. All right, now that we're all jealous, we have somebody checks in from St. Pete Beach or St. Petersburg Beach or in St. Pete every other morning, and that one gets under my skin too. But yeah, big recruiting news. On Texas Football continues to be on top of that on TexasFootball.com. I don't even know where to start yesterday. One of the big ones for me was Troy Hun, the 2026 quarterback out of Mission Hills there north in Carlsbad area, north of San Diego. By the way, you know what San Diego is, Blake? Home to Manscaped.com. Manscaped is in San Diego. I think that's where Bobby's going on vacation. Yeah, you know, Troy Hun, 6'5" quarterback, one of the two quarterbacks Texas has offered in 2026. He's coming in April 6th. So he will be here as a sophomore 26 recruit with the top 25. A lot of the top 25 guys coming in unofficially. KJ Lacey, the 25 quarterback commitment, will be in April 6th. Number of other targets will be in April 6th for the Longhorns. So Troy Hun, 2026 quarterback. It's never too early to talk about quarterback recruiting, especially as few as Steve Sarkisian and A.J. Milwee offer in a class. They've offered two in 2026. That is Troy Hun, and that is Jared Curtis out of the Nashville area, who I believe will be in April 13th, along with Will Griffin, another 2026 quarterback, very talented kid out of Tampa Jesuit. So that's kind of big news there. Because Texas and LSU are really starting to prioritize Troy Hun in that 26 class. And look, we talk about these guys early because those dominoes tend to fall. You got to remember KJ Lacey committed June 3rd at Texas Elite Camp last year before his junior season. Texas will probably have their 26 quarterback around that time, if not a little earlier. So maybe later in the December. So just something to keep in mind there. Juan Gaston, large humans. Look, Texas is recruiting that Atlanta area with Tashard Choice, now Kenny Baker. Both have a lot of ties in Metro Atlanta. Kenny Baker is obviously from the area, has ties all over Georgia. But Juan Gaston, offensive lineman out of Westlake in Atlanta. For those not familiar with Westlake High School, that is where Cam Newton played. So they've had a lot of talented players come out of Westlake High, including a Heisman Trophy winner and national champion. But Juan Gaston and his mom made an unofficial visit to Texas last summer, kind of caught people off guard. All of us that cover Texas knew he had an offer, but kind of a little surprised he made that visit. Juan Gaston, all 6'7", 350 pounds of him, scheduled to make an official visit June 14th through 16th. Steve Sarkisian and Tashard Choice were by the school in January when they were making some rounds there in the Metro Atlanta area. But Oregon, official visit. Georgia, official visit, obviously, and South Carolina. Those are the four official visits for Juan Gaston. So another offensive lineman that scheduled his official visit to Texas. Then this morning, I talked to somebody close to the recruitment of Kevin Wynn, the four-star defensive lineman out of Greene County in Greensboro, Georgia. Greensboro, Georgia in between Atlanta and Athens. So most people just chalk that up to Georgia. We'll see what happens. But Texas offered him February 20th. Tashard Choice and Kenny Baker both have some connections down there with the Greene County coaching staff. And I was told this morning that Coach Baker, Tashard Choice have been in contact with Kevin Wynn and his circle 2-3 times here since February 20th. They're talking about a spring visit. Texas is one of the places that Kevin Wynn wants to visit before he really locks in all of his June official visit dates. So, look, Texas is Sark calls it deep sea fishing, and that's the point in the proceedings we're at in 2025. When you've offered that many guys in Georgia with the power program Georgia is, and everybody you're competing against for those players premium positions. I mean, it's Oregon. It's Alabama, it's Georgia, it's Florida State, it's Clemson. I mean, Ohio State recruits them. Everybody recruits that metro Atlanta area, kind of like DFW. So you're in for some real battles. Gird up your loins and get ready, Texas fans. But Sark and the staff are deep sea fishing. They're recruiting some of the best players in the country. And the whole goal is to get as many as you can to campus, figure out where you have a real shot, legitimate shot, get those kids back on campus for an official visit in June and go from there. I say it all the time. Brandon Baker, Texas was distant on his radar, probably 5th or 6th, till he visited unofficially for the spring game last year. That kick-started that recruitment, came back for June for an official visit. Texas overtook Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, the top 3 teams at the beginning of that recruitment. Oregon had a big lead because his brother had played at Oregon years ago. But you get him on campus for, in April, get him back for that official visit, and then you see what happens. And that's where Texas is at in the process. But I will also say this: the staff is thorough in evaluation. They're going to use the spring evaluation period. Starts at the end of April, runs through May, to get out, see a lot of those top guys, make some decisions on official visits. I mean, there's going to be 3 times as many official visits set up as there are now publicly. And some of those guys, some of that board can change a little bit in the spring evaluation period as they go and take looks again at these guys, see how they're progressing, stay in contact with the circles around these guys, the coaching staffs, and get that one final look before official visits. So that's a crazy morning in recruiting, crazy time in recruiting.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. Well, you're doing a great job, Jerry. You and CJ both breaking tons of news over there on OnTexasFootball.com. And if you haven't been over there yet, there's not a better time than now. Go check it out. Lots of good discussion over there. Well, before we move on, guys, I need to tell everybody out there about Texas electricity ratings. If I can bring the banner up here. There we go. And kill this one. Sorry about that. But for those of y'all still living in Texas and in major cities with deregulated electricity like Dallas and Houston, you understand that the deregulated electricity market can be very confusing. Texas Electricity Ratings is a shopping website that lets you compare prices, read customer reviews, and find a good electricity plan that fits your needs. It also filters out a lot of the gimmicky plans on websites like Power to Choose that trick customers into expensive bills. So if you're in the market for a new electricity plan, shop TexasElectricityRatings.com/OTF for all your electricity needs and hook 'em. So I want to thank them for sponsoring today's show. Now, Jerry, you mentioned it at the very first, basketball. Texas looked good early on and then kind of fell apart there. Can you comment on that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, anytime you start shooting the ball that well to start a game, I don't care who you're playing. It was bang, 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 3 threes in a row to start the game, right? So Texas is feeling good about it. But even when Texas built that lead, when it was clear Dylan Dessou's stomach issue, he wasn't going to be able to handle many minutes. You knew defensively, it's not offensively if you're shooting the ball well, it's defensively protecting the rim. Really, being able to have that other guy to rotate with Caden Shedrick, because Baylor is a extremely talented starting 5. All 5 of their starters will play professional basketball on some level. They are all offensive threats. And I don't want to bring up the sad stories about Yves Missi. He was going to go to Texas, had all the beard stuff not happen. He was privately committed, and he was going to pick Texas over Baylor, but we don't need to rehash that for the 1,000th time. But they have a great offensive team. I'm not sure they have the depth to win it all, but Baylor has a great offensive team now. But even when they were shooting it well, they needed Disu defensively more than offensively because they were having a hot shooting night. And then one of the things with Texas, it just absolutely boggles my mind this year is Tyrese Hunter, just the lack of confidence. I don't want to call a guy out. I don't want to sit here and say he's mentally weak, but he made 2 threes to start the game last night. That's a game you should be confident. And everything was hesitant after that. On the catch from 3, hesitant, indecisive, indecision. And once Baylor really started getting the ball out of Max's hands, Tyrese had to play well, especially with Disu not on the court. But then you get to the Disu injury look, and this is where it gets tough as somebody who covers these guys. Texas saying, "Oh, he'll be fine." We'll see. Those injuries are normally bad injuries, right? But Dylan DeSuze had so many injuries that maybe it scares him, and he's okay, right? But if he's out for the season and Texas loses to Oklahoma, loses the first round of the Big 12 tournament, if in that scenario, I'm not saying it's happening in that scenario, I think the committee would have a tough time putting Texas in, honestly. I think they'd probably get in, but they would have a tough time putting Texas in because Texas is, without Dylan DeSuze, is not a tournament team, in my opinion. With him, they're good enough to upset a couple of people. But that's a big difference because Dylan DeSuze and Max Abmas have to play well for Texas to have a shot to beat people.
And Jerry, I'm going to ask you one basketball question, then we're going to go back to football here. Mike D says, "Good morning, UT family. The men's basketball played great the first half, but couldn't buy a basket in the second half. Is Brock getting the Draymond Green reputation and calls now instead of a foul they call a flagrant?"
Maybe, but I think it's. Look, I appreciate Brock. I think the football staff would appreciate Brock too. I'm sure Coach Shipley appreciates Brock as an athlete. It's deserved. I mean, look, he does everything. He impacts winning in so many ways. I'm a big Brock Cunningham fan. But look, it's when you get the reputation, it's deserved in a lot of cases. And his is deserved, and that's okay. It comes with the territory of who he is as a player. But yeah, I don't. Last night's call, if it wasn't Brock Cunningham, would not have been a flagrant one. I do agree with Fran Frischel on that. But I will also say, because it was him, he's going to get the flagrant one. Fair or not, that's what it is.
My kind of player.
Exactly. That's what I said. Like, look, I mean, you wish you had 3 guys like that. And Kendall Weaver is that. And that's the other thing that affected Texas last night. When Kendall Weaver got 2 fouls early in that game, even though Texas was shooting it well, that put him on the bench for a long time. And so when Texas was up, Baylor was able to make a run to get back into it, in part, 1, because Disu couldn't play much, but 2, because Weaver wasn't there to really defend one of Baylor's best guards. So, all right, football talk time. I got a question for Coach Shipley.
Hey, real quick, Jerry, before you do that, I just need to read 2 super chats real fast. Not even questions, just comments. UT Boy says, "Good morning, family members." Thank you, UT Boy, for the super chat. And then Poos says he's checking in from South Korea.
Very cool.
Thank you, Pooh, for the super chat. Now then, you do have a question for Coach Shipley, and I want the chat to also weigh in on this because I want to hear their opinions as well.
Yeah, so we were talking, and yes, the chat. Coach, I got to ask you, because we had this discussion. We have this discussion every 2 or 3 weeks. And last week, Blake, Bobby, and myself got in this discussion. Who's the best player you've ever seen in high school? Okay, because Coach, now I'm going to go out. Here's the coach's resume, 144 and 62, the best of my knowledge. Saw a lot of good players. Son was a great player. Who's the best player? It doesn't have to be somebody you coached against. Who's the best player you've ever seen in Texas high school football?
Wow, that's a great question. I remember someone who I thought was probably the best athlete I've ever seen, and I walked up beside him. I was the head coach at Rotan, the Yellowhammers. Went to a state qualifier track meet in Abilene and saw Roy Williams long jump.
Yeah.
And I looked up at him and I thought, that is the best. I mean, just watching him run and jump and athleticism, he was probably the best all-around athlete I ever saw, in high school. It's hard to say the best player I ever saw in high school. Jordan was pretty dang good. I mean, he was. People don't realize this. I think as a freshman, he was on an all-state team as a kick returner. He had three punt returns for touchdowns in his first ever high school football game as a freshman, varsity game. But he made all-state as all 4 years, but he made it as a kick return. No, I'm sorry. His freshman year, he made it as a kicker. So he made it as a kicker, a kick returner, a defensive back, a wide receiver, and then offensive MVP, I think. But broke some all-time state records. But I don't know. I just saw him do some pretty crazy things. I hate to be a homer like that, but he's pretty dang special.
And I love all the people. Somebody just said Rodney Thomas. Rodney Thomas, like Jordan, unbelievable small school football player. Rodney Thomas, literally that Groveton team, the quarterback, you'll remember R. McDonald 86. You watch Rodney play. The quarterback went to Oklahoma, I believe, on that team, ended up playing safety, but was the high school quarterback. But Rodney Thomas, because he ran pissed off and had great feet and was compact and powerful at the 2A level, man, those guys just didn't really have a chance. Tackle Rodney Thomas.
When I said Jordan, I'm talking about people that I was coaching or coaching.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the best player I ever saw, I saw him on TV, was Kyler Murray.
Yes.
I think he may have been the most dominant high school football player that I know he went to a couple of our rival schools, but if you watched him play in high school, he start all 4 years, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, he never lost a high school game he started.
Yeah.
At the highest level of Texas football.
Yeah. Yeah, he was I didn't see Earl play. I think Earl may have been the best football player I've ever seen, period. The best running back in the history in my opinion. He was dang good. I bet he looked pretty impressive at John Tyler as well.
I love seeing all the answers. We've heard Jesse Armstead, Cedric Benson. I saw him in person. Great player. Somebody said Aaron Green. That's interesting. Obviously, I watch Vince Young a lot. Being in Houston, Madison, unbelievable. I'll never forget. I'll never forget the game against North Shore in the Dome. I think it was North Shore at a 4th and 19, coach, season on the line. They ran sprint draw. And I was like, whoa. All right. Because Vince was sitting back there at safety, and you weren't getting 20 if you needed 20. Okay. But I just remember seeing that sprint draw call, and I was like, oh, 4th and 19 season on the line. It's an interesting call at that time. I wanted to ask you this. Somebody said Malcolm Brown, very good as well. So many guys, Adrian Peterson. My dad coached against Billy Sims, coach, when he was at Friendswood.
Wow.
And they beat Hooks in the 73 state title game at Friendswood. And my dad would probably say Billy Sims, right? Because he went up against them, like you were talking about, guys you coached against. But I want to ask you about Jordan. He had the tough luck injuries early at Texas. Talk about for an athlete, because, I see a lot of people talking about Jordan Whittington, and he overcame a lot of injuries. And you lived this with your son. Talk about the intestinal fortitude to kind of get through that, stay positive, because he's used to being the dominant player, right? And being healthy and being able to answer every call, right, when his team needs him. What was that process like for him going through those injuries early on? Because he didn't get to play his freshman year on the national title team, and he definitely would have been a key player on that team.
Yeah, well, I think he was relatively he had 2 injuries in high school. Other than that, he didn't have to go through endure a lot of hardship. Right. Unfortunately, those 2 games that he was hurt in were the state championship games. His junior year, he's crazy. He had an ingrown toenail, and it got really infected. And like on a Wednesday, we had to have it cut out. We were playing on Saturday. And then, so anyway, he continued to practice and play. And then the night before the game, he came in, that thing was swollen about twice its normal size. And anyway, went to the doctor. We wound up not being able to, he played, but he was about half speed. It was that staph resistant, or penicillin resistant staph. He's in the hospital 3 days. And then his senior year, he had a pretty severe concussion in the first quarter of that game, and shouldn't even have been playing anymore. He went ahead and finished the game, but he was, again, a shell of himself. So I think those two, they were on 2 injuries, but they were pretty devastating because it was a state title. And so I think even though it was only 2 injuries, it was so severe in his mind that helped him when he came in. And actually, the day he got hurt, Coach had announced him as a starter.
Yeah.
His true freshman season, and the last practice of training camps when he tore his ACL. And I don't know where he gets his grit from. Like I said, he never had to go through anything hard. I mean, he just growing up, he just lived a carefree life and didn't have to, go through a whole lot of adversity. But I think the staff, Coach Brown was great in encouraging him, and his friends surrounded him. But after the second time he got hurt, I don't know if you've heard this, but Coach Brown said, "Listen, Jordan, it's just not going to work out. You can be a student coach if you want to.
Wow.
You can, or we'll pay for your school. You don't have to do. You can just go to school and be a student, whatever you want to do. But I don't think it's going to work out for you." And he said, "Well, Coach, if it's all the same with you, I think I won't play." And so he's actually tried to talk him into quitting after his second year. And then, of course, his third year, they were a little bit gun shy. He pulled his hamstring almost in half the year we won the national championship. And then, so I think his third year, which was the first year he got on the field, they were a little bit gun shy. He wasn't playing much, just a little bit here and there. I thought that maybe he would transfer because it appeared that they'd given up on him. Right. But I'm just so proud of the way that he overcame all of that adversity and the fact that he did his work, but he didn't feel like the coaches believed in him. And so he just had to keep going out every day and proving himself. And then, finally got the opportunity in some games. As a matter of fact, this is a funny story. I don't want to dominate this, but a funny story is his first year, I believe it was his first year, we were playing at OU, Texas OU game. And his mother was so frustrated. She said, "I'm just, it was hot. She said, I can't stand to sit up here and watch him be frustrated like that. I just can't stand to watch it. I'm going to go out in the fair or something." So I said, "Okay." So she goes and she sends me a text or calls me and says, "Hey, I'm in the puppet show inside a deal." And I said, "Well, that's cool. Jordan just got in the game. Jordan just caught a pass. Jordan just scored, And yeah. And so, no, I think that was his second year. And then his third year, she has to use a bathroom. And so she goes up and uses the bathroom. Same thing. He scores a touchdown. Well, the third year, Jordan's junior year, she was dying of thirst. OU had the ball, had just gotten the ball. And so she goes up and all of a sudden they score a long touchdown and they kick off to us and Jordan returns at 96 yards for a touchdown. And so the last year, everybody around the parent section was begging her when things were going slow. "Hey, would you mind going up and going to the bathroom or getting a drink or something like that?" But anyway, it was just really, really, I think if somebody really dug into it and talked to Jordan about it and talked to the training staff and Mad Dog and all those people, it's pretty crazy everything he had to overcome. He wound up having 7 surgeries in all. And he's has a hard time getting up in the morning, I think.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great stories. Things you don't know until years later about, what you said about Coach Brown saying, Jordan, hey, maybe this isn't going to work out. Hey, Coach, next thing I wanted to ask you was, we're 14 days away from spring practice. So you've been in the buildings, right, at Texas, gearing up for spring practices. Not that you'll know everything that Sark and where they're at right now, but kind of take the fans, where are things at right now? Last week of training with Torrey Beckton, where's the staff at in their prep for spring practice? When does that begin? What kind of build out is that headed into spring practice? And how far ahead are the guys working on next season?
Well, since signing day, I know they'll have a staff meeting first thing in the morning and talk about, things that are going on, and then they'll break out offense and defense. And so for weeks now, they've been going through the implementation of what they're going to implement, what they're going to cover each day, doing practice schedules. And then the coordinators get together and say, okay, we want to see this look. Anyway, there's a lot that goes into planning a practice. You would think you just go out there, but everything's got to be scripted. All the plays that you want to see defensively, and the personnel and all that. So there's an awful lot of implementation meetings, and then and also I'm certain they've already been meeting with the players, position meetings, going over their implementation, watching film. I don't know how much of that is allowed before spring ball starts, but I know some of it is. So coaches have already got everything. They've already got every day of spring ball planned. Now it can change, and it will change. If you've got a lot of injuries, sometimes you may say, hey, let's pull off contact. We got some guys that, that are hurt or whatever. But they've already got everything pretty much installed, practices planned, and they're just tweaking things and going over it with the players right now. And then one thing that they've done that Tom started doing a few years ago, and he started in the spring, is having early morning practices.
Yes.
Which is really nice for everybody. It's nice for the players because, man, the classes are in the afternoon, and once you're through with classes, if you're an underclassman, you may have to go to study hall or something like that, but you may have to get a lift in at some time that afternoon. But it's really nice for the coaches too, because the coaches, when you practice in the afternoon, and by the time you get off the field and you're in the locker room and you're patting kids on the shoulder or whatever, and then you look up and start working at 7:00 that night, and you get out of there at midnight or 1 a.m. And so by doing it in the morning with the practice, you could be more efficient, it seems to me, with your work. So I think Sarks continue to do that. In fact, I think they practice in the morning all year round, don't they?
Pretty much.
Well,
yeah. Hey, so by the way, Blake, before we get in, I know we got some questions to hit on. Just because Texas starts 14 days, some colleges are already beginning. Miami's begun spring practice. Florida, future Texas opponent, begins spring practice March 6th. So I know we talk about Texas here, as we should, but spring practice around college football is getting going this week for some schools. There's some kids that are going to be taking unofficial visits to those schools, Florida State, Florida, Miami this weekend, around some spring practice. So spring practice in college football got going yesterday. And some of the opponents of the Longhorns are already going to be out on that practice field this week. And we'll be talking about that here the whole month of March and April as well.
Right. Okay, guys, we got a couple of questions and a couple of comments for Coach Shipley as well. But we'll start with this super chat here from Ashley Harrington. If I remember correctly, it's actually Ashley Harrington's husband. I do remember him clarifying that.
And it's not Joey Harrington. Her husband's not Joey Harrington.
Yes.
We asked that.
But he says, best Texas high school football player I remember was Butch Hadnot.
Talk about your guys that ran angry. I mean, there's one. I mean, Butch Hadnot had power in his hips and his thighs, and he used it.
So thank you, Ashley's husband, for the super chat. We appreciate that. And then Coach Shipley, a couple of comments for you. This one from Christian. He says, Coach Ship, I was on staff at Justin Northwest when we played y'all at Capel. Jackson was a freshman, I believe.
Yeah, I think he was a sophomore, actually. As a matter of fact, I think we played in the old Cowboy Stadium. We were fortunate enough to win that game and go on to the next round, and got beat by Allen when Tom Westerman, I think, went on and won the state championship. Funny thing, later their quarterback unfortunately got hurt and knocked out for the season. Was named Matt Brown. Do you all remember that?
Yes.
We kept thinking he's, Mac Brown. What Mac Brown? I didn't know he had a grandson down here, but no, it's Matt Brown. He got knocked out, and then the starting quarterback, the second team guy, came in and led them all the way to the state championship, and they were both underclassmen.
Yeah.
And then this next one here from Mike D. He says, one of the best performances I saw is when Coach Shipley coached against Stephenville at Brownwood, and Jackson Shipley scored every way, throwing, catching, running, punt, and kick return for a touchdown. And Coach, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that was your 100th career win that game.
Yeah, it was that was it. But Mike, I don't know about all that. You may be kicking back a little Grandpa's cough syrup this morning. I don't know if he scored on all those ways, but he did have a good game. He was a little bit. He didn't get to play against them his junior year. He had broke his collarbone in a scrimmage against San Angelo Central, so he grew up watching Stephenville his whole life because they were really, really good.
Yes.
And then one other one for you, and it's from Casey. He says, I remember Jordan having like 200 yards receiving against Jasper at Kyle Field by halftime.
You know what? People ask me the biggest game that we ever won that I was a head coach of was probably that game. It was the season of 2002. We'd kind of come from nowhere. We had lost season of 2001, we had lost in by district to Belleville in a close game, and then the next season we knew we were going to be really good. We had tons of underclassmen and two good classes back to back. So the next year we're undefeated, and we get to Jasper in the semifinals, and Jasper had not given up a single point in 6 straight games, not one. But 2002, not a lot of people were spreading it out, running the spread like we were. And the interesting thing is, the week before against Sinton in the quarterfinals, our quarterback Stephen McGee, who went on and of course had a great career for Texas A&M, he had torn his MCL. We were so far ahead; it was right at the point we were about to pull him out, right before halftime. Actually, he didn't play the second half. We were winning by 4 or 5 touchdowns. So. Nobody knew he had torn his MCL. Stephen liked to scramble. He liked to run around a lot, and I kept trying to get him to throw on timing, but he was so athletic, he could avoid the rush and run. Well, now he couldn't. So he was stuck. He had to throw it on timing. And so we thought with all the athletes they had, they'd be in probably man or man free and be blitzing. That's what we were hoping that they wouldn't do, because our quarterback, he couldn't scramble or get out of the way. So anyway, we go into the game, and they're running the defense that we didn't think there was any way they were going to run it, because anybody that ran against us, we toasted them. And I think at the end of the first half, I think we were winning. We had 28-7, and Jordan had 199 yards receiving at the end of the first half. They didn't know how to cover 4 verticals and cover 3. And anyway, there weren't a lot of people running the spread in 4 verts back then, but we ran it a lot, and that was a great game for us. Probably the funnest game I've ever coached in, because we wound up with a big win and stunning them when nobody thought there was a chance we were going to even score a point in that game.
All right, guys. Well, it's everybody's favorite time of the morning, Jerry Hamilton.
Look, I got to fill in. I got to fill in for Bobby Burton. How do you top Bobby Burton's Manscaped read yesterday? I'm ready for the challenge. Let's do it. Top of the morning to y'all. This episode is brought to you by St. Patrick's Day Shamrock Shavers Manscaped. This year, don't just chase rainbows. Make your own pot of gold and groom your little leprechaun with the leaders in below the kilt care. Say goodbye to your clover forest with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 and let your confidence shine bright. Embrace the luck of the Irish and join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped.com. Head over to Manscaped.com and use ON Texas, all caps, for 20% off plus free shipping. And let me just say this, guys. Ever since I used Manscaped, I can proudly say I found my pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's manscaped.com on Texas, all caps, for 20% off. Take care of your little leprechaun.
That gives Bobby a run for his money right there. That was impressive.
Coach, it's really bad. I'm really good at these reads.
That was very impressive, I gotta say.
You never let us down, Jerry Hamilton, that's for sure. All right, we're gonna take a couple of recruiting questions real quick. Antoine says, is the ideal size for this offensive line class 4 or 5?
5. Don't rule out 6 if anybody hits the portal. I mean, look, I credit the Coach Flood. He signed 12 offensive linemen in 2 classes, and they're all still here for spring practice. That's rare in college football these days. Can you keep, and 2 more early enrollees, so they have 14 of the 15 he signed will be at spring practice this year at Texas. Can you keep all those guys another year? Eventually somebody's going to hit the exit sign, right? I mean, it's inevitable. But I think it's a 5-man class because last year was 3. You could have a guy or 2 leave early coming up as well. You hope that's the case. That means you're recruiting guys and you're developing them quickly and getting them to their dreams of the NFL. So I see it being 5 because it's such a great year for in-state talent on the offensive line. And you're seeing Texas reach nationally continues to grow. Michael Fasusi, obviously, we talked about yesterday, Monday morning, June 21st through 23rd is his official visit. That's now been locked in on Texas Football Broke That News. And so he's coming in with Jackson Christian, Tyler Thomas from Dickinson. 3-4 offensive linemen are already in that June 14th through 16th weekend. So you're going to sit there and you're going to have 10 to 12 offensive linemen with official visits in June. So I expect it to be a 5-man class. Texas does not need a center. Center may be the deepest position in the program headed in this year with Jake Majors, Cole Hudson, Connor Robertson, and Daniel Cruz, who's going to be a stud as a freshman. He's a stud. He's going to be a stud player, guys. So center's really, really strong position at Texas. Guards, tackles, I think, in this class. Going to get a couple of tackles in this class, maybe a swing guy and a couple of guards as well. I see it being a 5-man class right now.
And then Vivek B says, do you think we have a legit shot at a number 1 or 2 class this year? And why haven't we been able to do better in state?
So a twofold there. We'll answer the first question. Georgia signed, 28, 29 guys last year. It's going to take a class of 27, 29 guys to have a number 1 class. Texas signed 22 last year. I just don't see Texas going that high enough, that type of number in a class. I could be wrong. I could see 24, 25. But if your class is 24, 25, they're going to count. Most people are counting the first top 18 or 19 guys in a class. So there's very little margin for error to get to a number 1 ranked recruiting class if that's what you like to chase. I'm not as big on that. I think anything inside the top 6, 7 consistently put you in a great position talent-wise in your program. But let's also say this. Michigan just won a national championship. I think they had those classes, 2 top 10 classes and 2 around 15. So evaluation, development, all of it still factors in like it always has. But I see Texas more in that 4 to 6 to 7 range because I just don't see a 28 or 29-man class. The second question, look, I think Texas is a national recruiting program now. We talk about this all the time. The last, I believe, 3 classes, somebody can fact check me on this, in the state of Georgia, and Georgia's on top of the college football world. And I say that because Metro Atlanta and the state of Georgia is absolutely loaded. Metro Atlanta is the most talented area I've gone to in the country. It's grown into that. And Kirby signed 3 of the top 10, 4 of the top 10, 3 of the top 10. He may get 5 this year, but he's only signing 3.5, 4 of the top 10 guys in the state of Georgia. And it's going to be, look, I think Texas signs 3 or 4 out of the top 10 in the state. That's about what you can expect. There's a lot of competition. You're in the NIL world. And look, some of those guys ranked in the top 10, you aren't going to offer. 2 years ago, Jackson Arnold's a top 10 prospect in the state. He goes to Oklahoma. Well, Texas got Arch Manning. So knock out a couple of guys that you don't go after. And if Texas ends up signing 3 or 4 of the top 8 in the state that they go after, that's a pretty good hit rate of top 10 players in Texas. I mean, recruiting's changed so much. And Texas is going to be a national recruiting program. I mean, Cedric Baxter, Texas picked Cedric Baxter over Reuben Owens. So you knock out a guy ranked in the top 10. So those things are going to happen the more you recruit nationally. So I think you have to look at the numbers a little differently. If you say, oh, Texas only got 3 of the top 12 prospects in the state in 2023 or 24, but then you look at, okay, well, 4 of those guys they didn't really go after because they went after guys nationally at the same position. So if you're hitting 50%, it's pretty good in today's world.
Hey, I just want to add this, Jerry. I don't keep up with recruiting like you guys do, Jerry. You're one of the best at it in the business, but I agree with you 100%. And you don't hear many people say that, but if you can stay in the top 6 or 7, but what you have to realize is, these recruiting are based on what people like us that have podcasts. We're the ones grading them. You know, it's not the college football coaches' grades. It's our grades. And so I know in the past I've been on staff with maybe some younger guys who I don't know. I thought maybe they were chasing stars. Yeah. And so next thing you know, they're recruiter of the year, and based on the stars they signed, and maybe none of them panned out, maybe one panned out, or whatever. And so it's very subjective. Those things are very subjective. Yeah. So I don't put any stock in that 1, 2, 3, whatever. Get the top 6 or 7. If you've done a great job of evaluating, you don't really care what Bob Shipley or Jerry Hamilton or Blake Monroe think about. What they don't go say, oh, I wonder what Shipley thinks about this guy. Now they're good. They know what they're looking for.
And to Coach's point, like if you look at a top 100 national rankings, I've been part of the ranking all the players nationally. One of the big things to consider is, that doesn't, Nick Saban turned down a lot of guys ranked high because maybe they didn't fit his culture. You got to make decisions, right? And this is what so when we rank all these guys 1 through 100, we're ranking them on their upside potential, right? But that upside potential may not fit Nick Saban's or Kirby Smart's or Steve Sarkisian's or Dan Lanning's. So they may pass on some of those guys. So the rankings, it's easy to rank. It's harder to take the right guys. That's the key about our business. And Coach, this is one of the things I wanted you to hit on is I think one of the toughest things in recruiting once you start to win big is you get in a position where you have to turn down more good players. And how important that is to protect your culture once you have your culture built. Because I've always said there's a difference between collecting talent and assembling a team. And I think the hardest thing, I think Kirby went through that. I know somebody close to that Georgia staff or was on that Georgia staff, and they predicted they weren't going to win it last year because they thought they had too many guys on cruise control, some of their younger players. And that's what I think made Nick Saban the greatest, was that he protected his culture. And after you won, those next couple of groups of kids that come in, they don't understand the why. They just expect it to happen because they watch that happen. So I kind of talk about that in your opinion, because Sark protecting his culture is going to be so huge in recruiting the next 2 or 3 years, because you can't make sacrifices in that culture that you've built, or those locker rooms can start to splinter.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things to consider with this, and we touched on it yesterday. The first thing is obviously when you get to the point through your success that you're able to recruit at the level that we're able to recruit, you can even get more specific on what you're looking for. And I think one of the hard things to do is find a great a kid that if he's not a superstar, he's going to be a superstar, but he knows it. Yeah. He knows it. But finding a guy like that who still somehow got a chip on the shoulder and doesn't think that he's all that, that's why Mac used to talk about being particular with it, but finding the right small school guy can be a great find for your locker room.
Yes.
Because those guys, Colt McCoy, Quan Cosby, Jordan, those guys are guys that, you know, even though they played at a 2A or 3A school, they all did back then. That's the divisions they had. And even in the back of your mind, as good as Colt was, or Jordan, or Quan, I promise you, they're still thinking, can I play at that? I mean, I just played like 2A ball. Can I really compete at that level? And so they go in there kind of like, you know, with their hiney tucked under them a little bit, running like a bear chasing them every single day, because they feel like they have something to prove, that I belong here with the best of the best.
That's right.
And so I think that's one thing about it, is being more particular with recruiting guys that, as best you can tell, fit your culture. But then the second thing is that's so awesome about what's going on now is Jordan Whittington and those great group of seniors that we've had. They have set the bar culture-wise in the locker room. And so before, Texas was, I mean, let's face it, we were entitled. You know, you start getting around 2010, 2011, and you think you've been winning, and we're going to win because we're Texas. And so the younger guys coming in see those older guys act, you know, too cool for school, kind of, you know, and don't practice with a chip on their shoulder, you know, and don't have a lot of guys that'll, you know, curb stomps, you know, have that curb stomp mentality, like a barroom brawl or a fighter, a guy like Casey Studdard, who, God, I love that guy. I mean, you know, just you get a team full of guys like that. We have that now. And so what you do is you keep recruiting those young guys that you feel like will, even if they're not like that yet, that they will be the type of person that will buy in and have that type of personality to buy into that kind of culture. And it just self-perpetuates, and it's really cool. I mean, Alabama, I mean, they don't have any guys in their program with Nick Saban too cool for school, you know, that you considered spoiled or entitled or whatever. Are you kidding? He wouldn't allow that in that culture. And so I see that. I don't see Sark being quite as you know, fist pounding kind of guy as Saban is, but he certainly knows how to create a culture because he's done that.
All right, so Blake, I'm going to make a prediction here, as I love to jump out on twigs and limbs. Coach is going to love Daniel Cruz because he's Casey Studdard, but he plays center. So Daniel Cruz we'll be talking about in 3 or 4 years as one of Coach Shipley's favorite players at Texas. Remember I said that one, because he is Casey Studdard, but he's just snapping a football now.
Give me 22 Casey Studdards, baby. We'll go to battle every week, every day. It don't matter.
Hey, by the way, the other thing that keeps a team hungry to me is, and I've said this before, this is a great year to be Coach Steve Sarkisian, because the team, they almost climbed the mountaintop, but they didn't quite get there. And I'm sure Coach could speak to this with Colt and Jordan junior year, then having a shot to go back senior year, and obviously Colt's injury in the title game. But when you almost climb the mountaintop, but you don't quite get there. And that's the same for the 3 Alabama guys that transferred. Then they lost a heartbreaker in the Rose Bowl to Michigan. This is still a hungry football team. And I think the other thing that keeps guys motivated, Sark's message and his staff's message is going to ring even more true now than it did before. Because now you had the success on the field. Now you're going to have 9 or 10 guys drafted. And Sark and Torrey Beckton, these guys can say, look, if y'all have some patience and y'all trust the process, great things are going to happen. Before it was selling a vision. Now the vision's reality. And that changes the game.
We're going to do a couple more recruiting questions here, y'all. Then we'll switch gears. But let's take this one from David Williams. He says, what do you think the chances are that Coach Baker in Texas land both Brandon Brown and Zion Williams in the 25 recruiting class?
So I got to ask Coach Shipley one favor. I'm going to send him Brandon Brown's huddle highlight tape later. And I want Coach to comment on Brandon Brown's huddle highlight tape tomorrow, because it's hide the women and children huddle tape. Okay, Coach, it is destructive stuff in over in the Space Coast of Florida. As good a junior D-line tape as I've seen. Honestly, just the power, the speed, explosiveness, just all of it. Just natural strength. That kid's a phenomenal talent. And now he's a little bigger than people think when they've gone out to see him. So he's got 5-star tape. We'll see where the rankings finish out. I don't care. He's top 50 kid in the country for me. But Brandon Brown will officially visit June 14th through 16th. He will be on campus for an unofficial visit March 22nd. And I say all that to say this. That'll be the first time Kenny Baker's not spent time face-to-face with Brandon Brown. And that's going to be huge in this recruitment because Brandon's going to be at Tennessee June 7th through 9th, USC the 21st through 23rd. He plays with California Power. I mean, explain that. But on the 7-on-7 team out of California, and he's in Melbourne, Florida. But I guess the space shuttle just takes him back and forth. Look, that'll be a big weekend, March 22nd, or that day spent with Sark and Kenny Baker for the first time. And I think Texas will have a battle there. They should be battling for top 50 kids in the country that live in Florida. That's where you want to be in this recruiting world if you're Texas heading to SEC. Zion Williams at Lufkin will be at LSU this weekend. Huge visit weekend for LSU, March 9th. Tyler Thomas from Dickinson will be there. Dylan Battle, another talented D lineman out of Mansfield, Timberview. Myron Charles may even show up there. Maybe March 26th for him. But a big visit weekend for LSU nationally, and a lot of those Texas kids will be there this weekend around the start of spring practice, getting ready for spring practice there in Baton Rouge. But Zion Williamson and Brandon Brown, I can't make that call right now. I do think Zion Williams, LSU and Texas are 1A and 1B for him. I think A&M's third, and I think TCU's fourth. He's going to officially visit TCU May 3rd through 5th. So I think it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But again, I'm a big shots on goal. I think Brandon Brown's the best D tackle that Texas is recruiting in that class. And I think Zion Williams is a really good over the ball player, and Brandon Brown's more of the 3 tech guy. You can play over the ball because he's so explosive. But he could also play 5. He's very, very talented. But I think the key there is for Texas to get kind of like offensive line. They can get 10, 11, 12 D linemen from around the country on official visits in June. They're going to walk away with 3 or 4 really good players in the class. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it, but Brandon Brown needs to be one of them.
All right. This next question, while we're talking about out-of-state prospects, comes from Aaron George, and he says, Jerry, I've noticed the staff seems to strategically target one out-of-state area each cycle. 24, Georgia, 2023, Florida, 2022, Louisiana. How does the staff determine where to target?
Yeah, I think that just kind of the way it happens, but Georgia's obviously the state Texas really wants to have some success in. They tried Tashard Choice's connections there. Obviously got Texas in the door. Not that Jeff Banks and Flood haven't recruited that area when at Alabama. They certainly have. But Tashard Choice being hired really opened up some high school doors there in that metro Atlanta area, but Tashard recruiting that area for years. Tashard also recruited Southwest Florida, Tampa, up through that Orlando corridor, an area where Texas is starting to have success. So a lot of times it's who you bring onto that staff. But that's Sark's. That's the strategic part of Sark's hire is knowing you're going to move to SEC. Who can we hire at this position, which we need, that can also help us recruit these areas? Kenny Baker's a Georgia guy. He's from the Peach State, right? He doesn't have national recruiting chops. He's getting them now. But he's got a lot of connections because he's been on the come. Then he went to the NFL from Western Kentucky. So he's got those Georgia ties as well. So I'm being long-winded about this, but Florida really started to open up when the move to the SEC was going to happen. Tashard Choice came on staff because he recruited Orlando down through that Tampa, IMG, Bradenton area. So you've seen Texas have success there. It just so happens that Cedric Baxter was the number 1 or 2 ranked running back in the country in that class in Orlando, Florida, and that was Tashard Choice's top target in the country. So that brought Florida into play. Then DeAndre Robinson, before he flipped to Florida late, defensive lineman, offensive lineman, Peyton Kirkland. All those guys are in Tashard Choice's recruiting area. I think you're seeing Texas branch out to Jacksonville in Florida a little bit more. I think you're going to see some of this in future years. I don't know if Texas is going to go get into battles down in Dade and Broward necessarily, but I think Tampa up to Orlando, ride I-4 all the way up to Jacksonville into those areas. I think Texas can recruit there, have success there. But Georgia that's the next state on Texas list. Look, Louisiana, that's Arch Manning, right? I mean, let's kind of go through that. I mean, there were some Will Randall, obviously teammate of Arch Manning, Derek Williams, but also LSU was going through transition with Brian Kelly. I think recruiting in Louisiana is going to be interesting in 25 and 26 because when you get Bo Davis and Corey Raymond on the staff at the same time, those guys and Frank Wilson are tight now. That's three of your best friend guys. And you already saw what happened with Jabari Antoine. So I think recruiting in Louisiana is a little bit more difficult in this cycle in 26. And why that's important is the number one D tackle on the board in 2026 is a kid named Jakeem Stewart out of St. Aug there in New Orleans, which that's where Leonard Fournette, Tyrann Mathieu, a bunch of NFL guys came out of that high school. I've got stories about that for another day. But long-winded story, long-winded answer is it's kind of just circumstance where the best players are. But I can tell you this, Georgia's the next state Texas wants to have success in.
I've seen this asked a couple of times. We've just never been able to get to it. Kyle B says, Jerry, I went to Denton Geyer. Are there any guys that Texas is looking at right now?
First of all, Kyle, what year did you graduate? Because I used to go over there all the time. Yeah, they have a lot of talent in those areas. Denton, Ryan, Geyer, that's a talent-rich area there on the way north of Dallas there. When you pass Louisville, Louisville's very talented right now. Obviously, Mike Fasusi, they're kind of on the come again. But yeah, Denton Geyer's got a 2027 freshman tight end, flex type of kid Texas has offered. He's been on campus 2 or 3 times. They have a defensive lineman, Xavier Pono, who will be on campus April 6th, a defensive lineman, 6'3", 280. Yeah, he spoke with Kenny Baker a number of times since Kenny was hired. He was at January 20 Junior Day. They have a couple other guys, maybe not Texas offer guys, but they're going to have 5'6" D1 guys every class at Denton Geyer. Same thing with Denton Ryan. Those are those areas where they're going to have 4, 5, 6 guys every year. And the young class at Geyer, I've heard 27 is really good. Their freshman class was really good. So I don't think that'll be the last offer Texas makes in that class.
All right, y'all. Well, it is time for me to tell everybody out there about Texas Electricity Ratings, the sponsor of today's show. And for anyone shopping for electricity in the deregulated areas of Texas, TexasElectricityRatings.com is the best place to find a great electricity plan for your household. For starters, it filters out the dangerous and gimmicky plans from providers that are all hat and no cattle when it comes to your monthly bill. You can shop by rate, but also by an average bill feature that actually takes into account seasonal usage to give you a real number and not just some placeholder. So if you're looking for a new electricity plan, be sure to check out TexasElectricityRatings.com/OTF for the best options available. And boom. Thank you for sponsoring each and every Tuesday right here on Texas Football.
Thank you, Texas Electricity Ratings. Hey, Isaac Darden, the Colony, 2 of the best young basketball kids in the state, lost in the regional finals. If you're a hoops fan, man, the Colony's got a couple of good years ahead of them in high school hoops.
And
hey, Kyle Hayden at 908 has a question we all have to answer. All right, get ready, Coach.
All right. Finish this sentence. Texas wins the national championship if.
Are we talking about 24?
Yes.
I got 2 ifs.
All right, go for it.
Well, number one, if our defensive secondary play improves to a national championship level, I think that's the biggest thing out there to me. And then secondly, it's coach talk, but if we stay healthy, I think we're as good as anybody in the country.
Blake, what you got?
I was going to say healthy. More specifically, if Quinn Ewers can stay healthy the entire year, which is something we haven't been able to see yet. So what about you, Jerry?
I agree with Coach on the secondary, and then adding one more adult in the room on the defensive line out of the portal this spring. I just firmly believe that it's a great year to be Steve Sarkisian. This is going to be a motivated team. I love that he's using the word obsessed. I think that's where he's at, and that's where he wants this team to be, obsessed with getting back to the playoff and this time hoisting the trophy. I think Texas, if they get a D lineman out of the portal that's an experienced adult in the room over the ball, and the secondary comes on to the level Coach said, I definitely think Texas is a better team next year. And that's saying something because of what we just watched in the combine, and 9 guys are going to be drafted. But with the portal, if you're a blue blood, there's no reason to be inexperienced. and there's no reason they'll have to have multiple NFL draft picks every year because you can pluck off guys out of the portal and get 3 a year that are going to get drafted to go with your own development. So secondary, one more D lineman out of the portal. And I think Texas is going to be a better team next year. And then, you just got to beat Georgia 2 or 3 times. That's it.
That's all.
That's it.
All right, we got a couple of super chats we need to get to. This first one from Juan. He says, is this David Pierce last season at Texas? If it's not, or Omaha or bust, go get Vanderbilt's coach, make him the highest paid baseball coach in the country, pay him $4.5 million. Your thoughts? My thoughts on number one, that's not happening with the Vanderbilt coach. And number two, if you could go for any coach, I would go after LSU's. But no, it is not his last season. If you don't count the COVID year, which we're not going to count for anybody, he's been there 6 years total, again, not counting COVID. And 50% of that time he's made it to the College World Series. 50% of that time he's brought a Big 12 championship. So just because they kind of start slow every year. And this year's obviously not the same. I think you need to give him time before you just push him off the bus and go hire somebody else. I mean, there are things that he needs to improve on. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's perfect by any means, but let's give it some time before we just kick him to the curb for no apparent reason.
That could all change in a few hours.
Yes.
We may be talking contract extension, or we may be talking he might not finish the season. There's some people that will put that much on tonight's game. Apparently, he hasn't put that much on tonight's game in the past.
Yeah. So we'll see. I know Texas fans will be very angry if he doesn't win tonight, but there's still a lot of time left in the season for sure. All right, Jerry's Jack Links with the super chat says, I ran into Miles Turner yesterday. Super nice guy. Figured Jerry would like to hear that one.
Yeah, here's a crazy recruiting story. So 99% of the time, coaches know if they're going to get a guy when he has an announcement, right? He's told them ahead of time. A lot of times in our business, they tell the coaches they're not going to the night before until the news breaks the night before a kid announces. Miles Turner is interesting. That was Chris Ogden that recruited Miles Turner on Rick Barnes' staff. And that was one situation where they literally didn't know until when he announced where he was going. They had not been informed that Miles Turner had not told Texas for sure he was coming. So that was one of those few times that a kid announced and the staff was like, hey, yeah, we ended up getting him, when they didn't really know. They felt good about it, but he hadn't told him he was coming. But heck of a player Miles Turner is. I kept hoping he was going to get traded to the Miami Heat, man. I thought that would have been an unbelievable fit for him, but not bad to be playing with Tyrese Halliburton.
Hey, real quick, I want to jump back to baseball for just 1 second. Burn Orange Horn says Texas is not up to the SEC NIL levels. There's so much truth to that comment. Like when Texas goes to the SEC, from what I'm hearing, they're going to be like more the Oakland A's than the Yankees, to put that in perspective. So for baseball fans, Texas One Fund is going to be your friend there. All right, let's get to some more football questions. And with this, we're going to go over some team questions. We're going to start with this one from Christian, Jerry. He says, when does the football roster come out?
That should be early next week, I believe. I think that's what CJ Vogel's hearing. I think Jarrett Gibson's wearing number 9. And so some of those numbers are going to trickle out. So that should be next week.
And then Archmania says, when Worthy was asked about what separates him from the other fast receivers, he answered it was the ability to stop at full speed and redirect. Yes. I agree. And do y'all think this is what will make him a good pro prospect?
What you got, Coach?
I think certainly. I think his acceleration is off the charts. And I do think, he's been able – I mean, it's not like people haven't tried to press him, but he is so quick. And then he has a burst that gives him the separation that he needs. And I think, obviously, even at an elite level. So I think that will translate into him being – and as a matter of fact, as great of a returner as he is, I don't know past his rookie year if you're going to see him returning many kicks. I think he'll be that valuable to a team that they just – and, being 165, 170 pounds, whatever he's going to be next year, I don't know how durable he would be able to be being a special teams player. But I think that's a great point. That acceleration and separation from 0 to 60 real quick, or 0 to 24, I should say.
Yeah, exactly. I can tell you in my years in the business, what's one of the most impressive things about watching wide receivers, evaluating wide receivers is, to me, if you're at an Under Armour camp setting where there's 20 Power 5 guys at a Florida camp or Dallas camp or whatever, maybe, or the Under Armour All-America game, which I was part of for about a decade. One of the most impressive things to me is when you get a group of really talented guys seeing who decelerates, because they're all fast. They're all explosive. They're all sudden. But who gets top end, decels, and gets back to top end? That under control. And so to that point, I think with Worthy, that ability to obviously accelerate, get the top end quickly. His start, when they ran him and John Ross next to each other on that 40, his start is as good as you've seen. But that ability to decelerate and then get back to full speed is, I think, as a undersized player, what gives him a chance to be tremendous.
Then Ski Breck wants to know, he wants y'all to discuss non-committable offers and what role they play in state and out of state. Yeah,
so I think that's a good topic. And, I'm not going to get into specific players necessarily, but let's just say this. There's some colleges that Nick Saban used to offer 200 players in a class. He did that to get those kids to campus so he could fully evaluate them, right? And some of the offers you're going to offer to get kids to campus, no doubt about it, because that's one of the things that Sark is in a great position now. That they beat Alabama, won the Big 12, went to the college football playoff, having all these guys drafted. What that does, it gets more eyeballs on you, so more kids are going to come visit you. So sometimes you have to offer some of those guys to get them to come to campus. And that doesn't mean all offers are committable. There's definitely a difference. But that's one of the great places Sark is in right now, is you can get more guys to campus. And why that's important, where I thought Nick had a huge advantage in college football because of his success, is he could get anybody to campus he wanted. So that meant he literally could evaluate those guys from the field to his office, and the 200 of the best players in the country. And if you're in that position, you're going to sign great classes. You're going to sign the right culture fits. You're going to find your culture warriors that are really tough players. I think that's where Sark is at in this program now. They have more kids on campus than ever. But to Ski Breck, to answer your question, you have to have some of those offers go out to get kids to campus. That's just the reality of it. And there's very few. One of the things I say is, a lot of kids have 30 offers. How many of them can call 30 coaches and they return the call?
Yeah. All right. This next question here is going to be from Champ Bailey 3. He says, what do you think the biggest miss was for the 24 class? I know Sark didn't miss on many, but for me, it's DeAndre Robinson.
Well, DeAndre, because he was in the class. But those who followed my opinions on that recruitment, I went to see DeAndre multiple times, is, I never walked away from DeAndre thinking he was all about being a Texas Longhorn and playing at Texas. So when Bo Davis left, that was one that, that didn't surprise me at all. Because look, there's things that happen in recruiting. And one of my red flags in recruiting, doing this as long as I have, is if a kid is talking to a head coach and position coach earlier in the week and then pops up on a campus but doesn't tell them, it's kind of a red flag in recruiting. Not for the kid being a red flag, you won't have success, but a red flag in terms of, I'm not sure I'm going to, that one's in pencil, not in ink. Okay. That was kind of always my thought with DeAndre Robinson. And then he made that Florida visit early in the season, and he had been on the phone. I was in Florida earlier that week at Jones High School for a practice. No mention of it. And I knew he had talked to Sark and Bo that week, probably to Shard too. And then he just popped up on Florida's campus and never told them. So that one was a red flag to me. So but from the class standpoint, that was a big loss because he's a very talented defensive tackle. I mean, if he will maximize his talent, he'll have football as a career.
And I thought we were going to get CJ to come on to talk about this, but we've had a few questions about it. C. Gaddis says, just realized the stream title. Can y'all cover no arch in the new video game? We never actually got to it. But,
yeah, I was on Austin radio this morning. My comment on that was, boy, we need spring football practice to start if that's a topic of conversation.
Maybe we can get CJ on a live stream later or tomorrow morning or something.
For those wondering, we have recruiting breakdown coming to later today around lunchtime with CJ and myself. I will ask CJ his thoughts on that right out of the gate. That'll be the first question. We'll get that one answered.
There you go.
Check out recruiting breakdown. We're going to tape it here in about an hour to be published around noon.
Okay, guys, we're going to close with this question from Michael Alvarado. And I guess pull out your pessimistic side here. He says, what do y'all think will happen to be Texas' biggest struggles in game if they do struggle this upcoming season? I know we kind of touched on this with the question earlier about what if, or, they go undefeated if. But what do you see possible struggles being this season?
They're going to struggle. I mean, it happens every year. There's going to be some things that people will either have breakdowns. People will see some chink in our armor and maybe expose some things like that. But again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but and pick on the defense, but it's a secondary that's going to do it for me.
Yeah, I'm the same. One of the good things about Texas' schedule is how many teams they play this year that can lean on them, lean on that D line in the run game. I like playing Michigan week 2 because they have to replace 6 offensive line plus the first guy off the bench that were all at the NFL Combine. If Georgia can lean on Texas a little bit in the run game, could have Kentucky even. They got 4 offensive line guys back. They're going to run the ball. You know what Mark Stoops is going to do. The teams that can lean on Texas on that defensive line because Alfred Collins, more of a disruptor. Vernon Broughton, more of a disruptor. Savea, obviously, is more of an anchor guy coming in from Arizona. We'll see where Sadir's at. So we've heard some good things about Sadir, but I'm waiting for the football field with that for his natural progression. But that's the one to me, along with what Coach said. But who can lean on Texas in the run game? But the good thing about the schedule is I'm not sure how many teams they actually are like that, even though you're moving to the SEC.
There you go. Okay, guys, so that's going to do it for today's episode of Coffee and Football presented by Texas Electricity Ratings. Jerry, before we get out of here, anything people need to be paying attention to on TexasFootball.com for?
Yeah, we're just have to recruit some recruiting stuff already this morning. We'll have some more throughout the day. CJ and I, again, we're going to get together for recruiting breakdown coming up here. Latest on recruiting. I think we're going to touch on defensive line, offensive line recruiting today because a lot of those guys are setting up official visits or spring unofficial visits, and we'll get CJ's thoughts on Arch Manning not being in the video game.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Texas Electricity Ratings along with Manscaped for sponsoring today's show. Thank you for the great super chats. As Jerry said, head on over to ontexasfootball.com. Well, you can further these conversations, get your questions answered, all that good stuff, and then get the latest on the news. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We would definitely appreciate that. Ring the bell so you're notified anytime a new video is posted or when we go live. So for Coach Bob Shipley and Jerry Hamilton, I'm Blake Monroe, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.